It appears that Mick Mulvaney, acting OMB director, as well as Donald Trump's chief of staff, is part of the cover up on Ukraine. So now, this is according to a report in the Washington Post, which cites a White House review. Acting White House Chief of Staff Mulvaney and budget officials got together in order to find a way to get an explanation for the hold on military aid in Ukraine. So now, this is important because they're getting together to try to figure out a legal rationale to Donald Trump's sudden hold on that aid, which of course was contingent, as we find out, and getting the Ukrainians to announce, specifically the President Zelensky, to announce an investigation into the Bidens. So now in early August, Mulvaney asked acting OMB, I'm sorry, yes, I got it wrong actually. He's not the acting OMB director. It's Russell Voigt. So now Russell Voigt back in August um, was asked by Mulvaney how much longer the aid could be legally delayed and inquired about the OMB's progress on developing a legal rationale for the hold. Now, Donald Trump had made the decision back in July without consulting anybody regarding its legality, according to the Post, citing two White House officials. Because, of course, that's exactly what Donald Trump does. Trump, out of the blue, says, you know what, I'm going to withhold this aid in the hopes that I will get a public announcement as it concerns the investigation into the Bidens. Really? Mulvaney and his team, of course, instead of trying to stop it or being like, hey, what the heck's going on? Congress literally passed this, so we have to do this. And unless you have a really good justification for that aid, as some presidents had with other aid in other places, well, then we can't just legally hold it. Well, instead of doing that, they covered for him. And they did try to come up with a legal basis after the fact. And of course, they found, oh, corruption. Everybody hates corruption. So we'll just use it. We'll just use the corruption. That's it. And that's undefined corruption, which didn't seem to involve any Ukrainians, just Joe Biden and just CrowdStrike, which they falsely claim is a Ukrainian company. It is not a Ukrainian company. It's an American company based in California. But anyway, Vout and other OMB staffers argued for the hold's legality in the emails with the State Department, and National Security and Council officials pushed back, according to the Post, with OMB attorneys arguing that it was legally justifiable as long as it was considered a temporary hold. Okay. So, temporary, right? And look, I guess if you're a right winger, you can point out, well, it is temporary. They ended up getting their money, so there wasn't any problem. No quid pro quo. So, complete and total exoneration. Now, the problem here is that once Congress found out that this was being held, they were pissed. And like, release it immediately. Donald Trump didn't want to release it, didn't want to release the hold. He ended up doing so without getting that announcement for an investigation, which, by the way, all he was looking for was the announcement. We find this out later. First, we thought, okay, for the investigation. No, it's just the announcement, which means he didn't care about corruption in Ukraine at all. Didn't care. It didn't register. All he wanted was the soundbite so that he could play this during the 2020 election and say, look, he's under investigation too. I had the Mueller witch hunt, but this Ukraine thing, that's real. That's real. That's why you need to reelect me. That's what that is. And the problem is, and the reason that people on both sides of the aisle were pretty angry about this is because this was a check on Russian aggression in the area. Ukraine, they were in a really hard position. Zelensky is, right? Because for one, he needs that money, right? That Ukrainian aid money, in order to again stave off Russian aggression. They've already came in and taken Crimea, annexed it, and Zelensky doesn't want this to happen again. And so, right now, they're dependent on Washington. And of course, there's this whole deal with all this this pipeline that's supplying the natural gas. to the EU, and so it's a complicated situation for everybody involved, and that's why we're so concerned about Ukrainian corruption, and that's why Donald Trump can piggyback off that and say, "Oh, I'm concerned about Ukrainian corruption. Look at Joe Biden. Look at Burisma." And so, look, uh, okay, so there's that, right? So now the review also includes email conversations between OMB and state officials discussing potential legal issues with the White House holding that near $400 million in military aid. Now, Mark Sandy, he was the only OMB official to testify in the impeachment inquiry, said the delay was highly unusual and that he had never known a political official to assume control of an aid package in such way, according to the Post, citing people familiar with his testimony. And that's because, of course, look, I've seen this quote a lot of times. Not this like particular quote from this particular person, but similar quotes throughout the time that we've been, having Donald Trump as our president. Oh, I've never seen this happen before. Oh, this is so unusual. This is, this has never been. This administration is so unlike any other administration. Well, that's what happens when you elect a totally corrupt clown, and that's what he is. The administration is corrupt from top to bottom. Here you have people that are driven essentially by personal or political interest. I know Donald Trump says, "What? I hired the best people, the greatest people to drain the swamp." No, he didn't drain the swamp. He filled it up with swamp monsters. He increased the size of the swamp very, very greatly. It is now a very big swamp, the swampiest swamp. That's what this is. Now, you could argue that a lot of other corrupt administrations have been corrupt as well. And look, you'd be right to a certain extent. Now, there's always corruption, right? That's systemic institutional corruption. What's different about this administration is that they're very blatant about it, and they have a lot of personal corruption. And again, that stems from the deep personal corruption of Donald Trump. Now, you put that in, and what you have is something that we haven't seen since Nixon. And even Nixon had more integrity than President Trump, and shame. And so, look, that's why he ended up resigning. With Donald Trump probably thinks Nixon is both a loser and a sad baby for actually resigning. Donald Trump ain't going to resign. Oh, no. And look, let's be honest. If the GOP had the same kind of cult mentality towards Nixon that exists today towards Donald Trump, maybe Nixon wouldn't have resigned after all. Maybe he thought, I could get through this. Not a problem. I don't know. But one more point on Mulvaney, which I think is important to touch on, is what Mulvaney did illegal. Not necessarily. So what he did is he said, well, look, there's this military hold from Trump. He wants this held up. Maybe I know the reason why. I don't care the reason why. I'm going to go and I'm going to try to figure out a legal justification for doing so that we could defend it in courts and from the media and the public if we have to. And we're just going to call it blanket corruption. Now, the thing is, with Mulvaney involved in this, maybe he did know what happened. And so I think that Mulvaney, if he hasn't already, should be subpoenaed. Have him testify immediately, and if he doesn't comply, well, you know what to do. Lock him up. Lock him up. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills
and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.